We know this story, right? It's about two religious leaders who, in the name of the law, see someone in unimaginable suffering, but decide to steer clear and cross the street instead of attending to the person's extraordinary need. And we know the context, right? The Jewish people detested the Samaritans and vice versa, so they had absolutely no dealings with each other whatsoever. For a Jew to call someone a Samaritan, and again, vice versa, was the highest racial slur, the most cutting, nationalistic, and religious insult imaginable. And we know this parable's meaning, which isn't always the case with parables, right? But this one is crystal clear. It's not a pleasant tale about the traveler who did his good deed for God. Rather, it's a damning indictment of social, racial, and religious superiority. A story that issues the challenge to each of us to decide between a life of involvement or non-involvement. The story leaves no doubt that what really matters is to act with mercy, as the Samaritan did, in the same simplicity, governed completely by the need of the suffering person who confronts us. Some helpful perspective is gained when we realize that at the time of Jesus, priests took turns by lot at performing the ritual sacrifices in the temple. And a man could wait his entire life for just one turn, one chance to perform what gave meaning to his entire life and position, the pinnacle of his whole career. When his name was pulled from the hat, so to speak, he had to prove himself clean and worthy to offer the sacrifice. And if he had touched any blood or came in contact with a dead person, he would defile himself and be unable to lead the ritual. And his turn would pass on to another. The same is true for the Levite to a lesser degree. If he would have touched the wounded person, he too would have been subject to a substantial period of purification and separation from the community. And this means that he would not have been able to perform his paid professional services during this time. So basically, he would have been out of a job and lost some significant income. What's interesting is that essentially the religious structure for the priest and the Levite actually worked against their choosing to help the person laying helpless and half dead in the ditch. The despised Samaritan was moved to pity and acted with compassion. The Levite and the priest saw but were not moved. They had too much to lose in stepping off the road. The practice of their religion actually inhibited them from doing the merciful and loving thing. In the name of the law and religious purity, they turn away from touching another person's distress. We've heard it said that the story begins when the storyteller stops talking. So we might wonder together, what does the lawyer do when Jesus stops talking? Or if we put ourselves in the parable, how did the man in the ditch, a good Jew, feel when he woke up and found that he had been nursed and cared for by a despised Samaritan, and that this Samaritan was coming back to repay the innkeeper? What would he have done? If we were in a ditch in that condition, who is the last person in the world we'd want to help us? The last person we would want to be indebted to for the rest of our lives? Is there any one or any group that we feel that way about? Do we really understand what Jesus is saying with this story? And if we do, what will be our response? Do we put our fingers in our ears? Or do we hear the words of Jesus echoing in our hearts, speaking the truth that we already know, but find so difficult to live? There is no us in them. That's just a destructive illusion. There's only us. Jesus prayed for us to be one, to be defined by our love for one another. Human beings are like one organism. When we demonize and promote division with our words and our actions, we destroy our connectedness. We thwart the kinship that God wishes for us as a species, the oneness and collaboration for which we were designed. In his book, Tattoos on the Heart, Father Greg Boyle tells the story of the time when their church decided to allow the homeless men of the community to sleep in the sanctuary of their church on a regular basis. And as a result, the place started to smell like stinky feet. So he joked that every Sunday he tried to cover up the smell by throwing, I love my carpet out on the rug and placing potpourri in strategic places. But still, people were beginning to grumble, and word had it that some were even considering going to a different church because of the stench. So Father Greg decided to address the issue head on with his parish one Sunday morning. And he asked the people, "What's the church smell like?" And many people were sheepish, to say anything, casting their eyes down and squirming in their seats, while others pretended that they didn't hear him ask the question at all. Finally, this one guy chimes in and says, "It smells like feet." And Father Greg says, "Excellent. But why does it smell like feet?" "Because many homeless men slept here last night," says a woman. "Well, why do we let that happen here?" "Because it's what we've committed to do," says another. "Well, why would anyone commit to do that?" said Father Greg. A few people responded, "Because it's what Jesus would do." "Well then," Father Greg asked, "what does our church smell like now?" A man stands and bellows, "It smells like our commitment." And the place cheers. And he said, a woman in the front row waved her arms wildly and said, "It smells like roses." And the packed church roared with laughter and a newfound kinship that embraced someone else's odor as their own was celebrated. It just doesn't get any more gorgeous than that. Jesus says, "Go and do likewise." In this lies our hope.